Hi, everybody. My name is Andy Mackey. I'm the EVP at Protogen, and today I will be your GridNav tour guide. I do want to very briefly address the question of services being available for individuals. If you're interested in the GridNav software that you see today, and you're interested in it in a capacity for a township, municipality, borough, whatever, we'd recommend that you reach out to anybody on the team and we can get you set up. Also, if you just go to gridnav.io, anybody can just sign up for a free account. And you can get access and you can start playing. When you get there, you would see this screen. You can click, don't have an account, sign up, or you can even try for free. So that's the quickest, fastest way to get yourself in. But if you want to be part of a program and group together, we do recommend that you reach out to us so we can organize you guys into a group, because that's where a lot of the best features come, being able to share and collaborate across with each other. That being said, I'm going to jump into what I like to do with this tool, which is just get started planning. So we saw some questions that are saying things like, it's hard to get one of these projects funded. Absolutely. There's no denying that. The energy industry is shifting rapidly. What we want to impress upon you is there's no time like the present to plan. GridNav's goal is to plan rapidly and broadly so that when tides maybe do shift in your favor, or you do find a project, or you want to look for specific projects, you at least have something to go with and you're not starting at square one. That being said, I want to walk you through a demo of the fastest workflow to get to a plan as quickly as possible. When you enter GridNav, you'll see your portfolio page. Typically, I know I want to do an analysis, so I come over here and I click Analyze on the left, and that lets you get started right away. I've picked a relatively random site to review with you guys today, and it's a Bethlehem City Water Treatment Facility, and it's at 355 Granger Road in Northampton. So you can just start putting the address in when you see it, click the address you want. Typically, I like to work down the left side of this page and then make myself over to the right side of the page. So that's what we're going to do today. Project type, we could do commercial depending on the utility service they have. I'm going to hit industrial, assuming they're getting an industrial three-phase service. Load profile, if you don't know your building's load profile, you can just put in your annual consumption and then pick from one of these standard load curves. That works for commercial buildings or residential facilities. You can even pick what type of heat you have. But we did pick a water treatment facility, which is not really like a warehouse or a fast food restaurant. So what I'm going to do today is show you the upload CSV function, where you click that and you pick your upload CSV. It's open on my other screen, but I'm just picking a 8760 load profile. I'm going to hit open. It says it's valid, and then you pick the year of that load profile. It was 2025. This is not their specific load profile. The tool is the most accurate when you have a load profile. So if you have a utility that will let you get annual data, by far, this will function the best. If not, you can just put in 12 months of bills, the kWh value from that, or even your whole year aggregate. But if you do get 8760 data, we recommend that you use that and then program in when that series of data started. It'll show you the load profile. You can look at how it differs from weekday to weekend, what months are high or low. And the next most important thing when you're looking at an energy system typically is going to be your utility bill. If you know your information, you can program in your specific tariff, or you can use a flat rate. But once again, I like to recommend people work fast. So you can just look up a tariff. I'm going to do URDB, that's the utility rate database, tariff lookup, and then you can pick the one that most likely fits your situation. For this, I think it's probably PPL, large general service, and we want to do the delivery and supply because that's going to have both your energy price as well as what it costs to leverage the wires. and it has the supply price, so we'll pick that. If you want to program in a future utility, you can customize a tariff. It'll pop up. It'll show you all the options to make any adjustments you need. The next thing I like to do is skip almost everything else because I want to see what this system is going to look like with solar and battery. So without making any changes, we're just going to say we're interested in a solar and battery solution. And we're also interested in seeing if there's a resilience opportunity here. After we do that, we're going to do map because I don't necessarily know how much solar I can fit on this building. There's been no engineer out there. We don't have a helioscope or something else already run. So the fastest and easiest way to do that is to bring up the map and start drawing it out. So I can see this facility. They've got a little bit of flat roof space. I'm just going to click around the corners for speed. Now we have a solar array on the roof. I know that's probably not big enough. I also know you can do a ballasted solar array ground mount with very few penetrations in certain situations like this. This is looking like some kind of leaching field. You can probably put a rock ballasted ground mount right there as well. So I'm going to close that, drag this arrow around so that it's pointing in the direction that the arrows or that the solar arrays would be facing. And then let's tilt it up to about 5 to 10 degrees for a flat roof. So let's just go 7, somewhere in the middle. And it's telling me right now that based on that space, you can probably fit 436 kW. Depending on the panels you buy, what solar engineer you deal with, you can get that to shift. So we don't worry about it too specifically. We're looking to get in the ballpark, and that'll get us in the ballpark. The final thing I want to do before I hit calculate is figure out what kind of outage I'm looking to cover. 3-day summer seems a little extreme, but let's try 1-day summer. I know this is not going to pencil out because we only have solar and batteries. So let's see if we can just cover 1 summer day. And the other button I'm going to click is recommend CLF. So if the system's going to look at how much solar capacity you just laid out and what your load profile looks at, and it's going to say, based on that amount of solar, what's realistic to cover. And my hunch is that this is going to be very low when I click the button. Yeah, 8%. This amount of solar can probably only cover 8% of that facility's energy, but I don't care. I'm interested in saying, I want to keep this building up 100% of the load for 1 day in the summer. And I'm going to click submit. What this does is it takes the parameters you've just input. It's made a few assumptions for you with the default settings, some auto settings like pricing, scaling, things like that. And it sends it into the, I want to say NREL, but it's the National Lab of the Rockies now, re-opt engine. That's very similar to how we got our favorite PV Watts tools. And it does an optimization. And in this optimization, it's looking for covering your resilience goal, which was that 1-day summer outage, and optimizing economics. In not too long, you get your results, and I can tell you right away that this system is not economically optimized because we're losing almost $400,000 every year on the system. I'm not worried about that. I know exactly why that happened. It's because it's a huge battery trying to cover that outage. If we see the PV size, we got 436 kW on the roof and the ground mount, and then a reasonably sized battery. I expected that to be about a 1 megawatt load. The battery and the solar can cover that, but it needs 25 megawatt hours of batteries. If anybody's familiar with large scale batteries, that's about 25 shipping containers of batteries. We know that's not realistic, but I want to keep going through this tool and show you how we can leverage some of the things that come out of it. The first chart is the system overview that shows you your average day for every month of the year. And we can see there's this big blue band. That's because you're buying all your energy from the utility. Orange is the solar, and then green is your battery. Things below the x-axis, where this 0 is, are you recharging your battery? So you are recharging the battery from the grid and solar. And then what I like to do is say, I want to look at this every single day to try and figure out how the system's actually operating. So you can click annual and you can start zooming in. And what we're going to notice almost immediately is this flat topping that's occurring. So hopefully you can see that there's a bit of a flat top across that blue band. That's because this system is very clearly trying to create a demand reduction by leveraging the solar and the batteries to offset that load spike, ratcheting up your demand profile. But we also know that this system's not going to pay back. So let's not dwell on this for too long. I know I just dumped a lot of information on you, but one of the strengths of the GridNav tool is if you don't really understand everything that's going on, but you want to maybe have somebody explain it to you. Well, if you click on any of these headings, it's going to create an AI generated, highly pre-engineered prompt that takes all of the information that the tool just calculated and generated, and it puts it out in plain English for anybody to read. And I'll show you later how this also feeds into creating a report. So if we move down through the chain, you can see the outage. You can ask how the system operates. You can get a resilience assessment, like how is it going to operate specifically in the outage. And then there's a bunch of other information that you will probably find very useful, but I don't want to dwell on today. A couple highlights here is that we've got a negative net present value and no payback. And that's okay. We pretty much expected that to happen. So let's look a little closer as to why that happened. I'm going to scroll up to the top and go to the financials tab. This is the next, what I think pretty strong strength of this tool is it gives you a real-time cash flow that you can play with. And it effectively creates a sensitivity analysis for you and gives you immediate visual feedback that, yeah, the system's never going to pay for itself. But we know that because we've already seen it. It gives you a ledger that adds just like any accountant would look. It adds from the top to the bottom. And the one thing I want to draw your attention to here is that it's a relatively large demand charge savings. So we've got an energy savings, $39,000, and a demand charge savings of $87,000. And that's because I could see that the solar and the battery were really trying to shift demand and keep that utility purchase from spiking. I don't want to dwell too much on this chart because we know it's effectively a loser. Nobody's going to invest in this. You would need massive incentives. So let's just save it as a baseline. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to say assign to project. I'm going to create a new project, call it just demo one for today, and we'll call this baseline. So we assign that to the project, and then we go, all right, I know nobody really wants this project, but I've got some ideas of how we can make it work. So you just hit this back arrow and you start making some changes. The first change you could make is changing this CLF. If this was a school, or I don't want to say something that's not super critical, but a water treatment facility, you need almost the whole load up. Maybe you could dial it to 70% because you just need to pump to high storage and that'll get you through. But if you had a school or even some lower tier from like a trauma center perspective, medical facilities, you could probably get by with only 30 or 40% as absolute critical loads. So that is a lever you can dial. But we've got another lever to dial here, and that's turn on a generator. I looked at the satellite, and we can look at it again together real quick. If you look in the backyard, there's a generator. That is about a 1 megawatt Cummins generator from my eye in the sky. That would be my estimate. So let's put that in. Let's say there's a generator, but it's existing. So we don't want to pay full price. So I'm going to scroll down to the bottom and say custom pricing, generator. Let's just put in $10 a kW, and that's only to tie the generator back into whatever system we're going to use. So maybe we need some more controls. That'll be a couple $1,000s at the end of this calculation. So let's run it again. I will mention, if you dive into this tool and this piece of the puzzle right here feels like you're waiting forever, 9 times out of 10, it's because you picked a tariff that has tiered rates. That makes the calculation grow exponentially because it has to calculate everything for every single tier jump. So I would recommend picking flat rate if it feels like it's hanging up on you. So here we are. We've got a new calculation, and I can see immediately that this is looking better. It's got a positive annual benefit, $1.2 million CapEx up front. This might be workable. Let's see why. Well, our battery is much more reasonable. We have a 222 kW battery with 441 kWh's. So that's a couple hour battery. That seems very reasonable. It's in a good relationship and ratio to the solar, meaning the solar could effectively fully recharge the battery in a day or two. And we've got a pretty big backup generator. And that backup generator is carrying our outage, is my hunch. So let's just scroll right down to the outage period. Yeah, almost entirely generator cover that outage, but we do see some generator smoothing or fuel savings with the battery ticking on, and the solar is taking a chunk of the energy in the middle of the day. You can zoom in once again annually, and my expectation is that we don't see the flat topping. And we don't see the flat topping, and you may say, well, I wanted a battery. But remember, this tool is going to do a resilience cover first and then an economic optimization. And because we didn't need the massive battery to cover our resilience requirement, because we have the generator now, we don't have enough battery capacity to do demand reduction. So it's saying it's way cheaper to just use the generator you already have and forgo a massive battery. But we do get a few spike reductions in the battery. That's in June. And then you can see the purple, that's the battery cycling. You can kind of drag it around to see when that might be occurring. It's load peaks from the profile. We did get a little bit of peak shaving, but not nearly as much as we saw in the other one. So let's take a look at the financials. Oh, all right. Are people rushing to finance this project at a 19-year payback? No, maybe not. But it also does cash flow itself in 19 years. Let's take a look at the demand charge savings, about half. The solar and the smaller battery can only save you a fraction of what that huge battery could have saved you, but your CapEx is much lower, which means your OpEx is much lower as well. Next, I want to show you that sensitivity analysis functionality. So you can come in here and you can change anything. Say you got a proposal from a contractor or an engineer, and they said, we can't install solar at $1.92 a kW. It's going to be more money than that. Well, you can slide it up. Or maybe you have purchasing power because you have a bigger system and you can actually get it for $1.82. Well, that's good. Maybe you can get your batteries a little cheaper. You can do any permutation that you can imagine with this functionality, as well as saying, we're going to go out for a grant. How much grant do I need to cash flow this in 10 years? Well, we can open up the grant sliders and say, we want this to cash flow in 10 years. Let's see how much solar grant we need. We need $1.07 per kW for a solar grant to get this project to cash flow in 10 years with nothing else changing. So this tool becomes really powerful for grant planning. And then you can come up to the top and say, well, I need about a $500,000 grant in order to get this project to work. I'm going to reset this so I can show you one more functionality, which is comparing these projects. I'm going to put it on the existing project, which was demo 1, and we're going to call this scenario 2. I'm specifically not descriptive because GridNav doesn't really require you to be descriptive. It keeps that information forefront for you in other places. So let's say we've got a portfolio of projects that we want to consider and multiple scenarios in that portfolio of projects. How do we start making decisions? Well, you go to the portfolio page. And in the portfolio page, you can see all the projects you've run prior. Here's all our demo projects. Megan's recently been doing some hardening testing for us, so she's most in here recently. And we can see the projects that I just ran with the two scenarios. We have the baseline, $10 million CapEx, versus scenario 2, $500,000 CapEx. And you can see all the metrics carried through. And we can see the difference here is that this one has a generator and this one doesn't. Maybe you don't want to think about all of this yourself and you say, hey, I wish there was an AI tool that could give me a comparison between 6 projects. Well, there is. So you pick the projects you want to analyze and you hit compare, and it will fly you to the top and it will give you that standard online shopping experience of how does product A align with product B. And we try to make the better options be green. And you can see it kind of flip-flops here because lower CapEx is better, but a bigger battery in theory could be better for other situations. You can see the cash flows lined up side by side, and you can see how their outage responses were handled side by side. And you can compare as many projects as you want. I think we've tested it up to about 24. Now say you want somebody to write out this comparison for you. Well, you click that compare button and you say, generate an analysis for me. And once again, it's made some pre-populated prompt engineering that takes all of the energy tables, the finance tables, the charts, the graphs, the paybacks, the levelized cost of energy, and it starts to try and figure out how these projects compare side by side. And it's got a lot to think about, so it takes a second. But as long as you're patient, you will get a comparison across all of your different scenarios. There we go. It says you're comparing 2 radically different resilience strategies on the same industrial load. So it tells you how those things stacked up. And then the one thing I like to mention here is as much as we control the analysis to be grounded in facts, the numbers that you've already seen, we also want it to think outside the box and be a little bit inspirational. And because it's AI powered, we have the ability to say, think outside the box. We want you to come up with some clever ideas, but I need to tell you guys that you can't trust this 100% with every word that's in there. You need to use your own common sense because some of these answers are pretty out of the box. So as long as you use your critical thinking hat, you'll be able to see the ones that make a lot of sense, and you'll be able to see some that go, that doesn't really apply to my situation. But it's there. It's a tool. It's supposed to be inspiring. It's supposed to let you think and raise some things that you couldn't think of and to raise them quicker. For instance, it can calculate 8,700 intervals instantaneously and tell you exactly how many of those intervals you didn't have utility power. That's really powerful. I'm going to take a quick breath because I know I'm just pouring information at you, but I want to show you one more tool which lets you get a report in under 5 minutes. So say you have one of these scenarios and you really like it, and you say, I want to do something with this. Well, you can come to the portfolio page, click on its name, and say, I want to see all the results, just like I had it before. You can review everything. Yep, this was the one I liked. I liked the results. It was good on the financials page. And then you say, I want a report of this. So you click the Generate PDF Report button. It pulls all the narratives in, and it allows you to edit them. So if you didn't like something you saw, or you had your own language you wanted to include, or there was a section you just wanted to exclude, you just come in here and delete it, or you can do that later in the PDF. But I'm just going to hit Generate Report. Report downloaded. Let's look at it. So in a number of minutes and a few clicks, you can start iterating on these things. Yes, it's not engineering level detail, but the optimization engine is really quite solid from the REOP program. And then you can take this and go to that next level of engineering and say, this is what we think we can do. This is the load we need to cover, the size of the assets we need. Can we absolutely get this to fit on site? And you have a report. I think this is probably about 10 or 12 page report that covers everything that the system generated for you. Let's say you have that report, you have the project, and now you need to see where this thing lives in space. So then I like to go to the map page. You can turn on the scenarios button. You can see all the different scenarios that have been run on this demo account. And let's see if we can find that Bethlehem project. This is it, demo 1, scenario 1, and scenario 2. Maybe you're interested in understanding how this fits in the interconnection world. You want to understand where the transmission lines and substations are. You can turn those on. Maybe you've got other concerns like flood zones. You can turn those on. Obviously, you don't want to install solar or critical facility assets in flood zones, so you can turn that on. There's a whole host of other items that you could turn on when you're trying to evaluate one of these projects for a number of different metrics. But the final thing I want to show that some folks are getting pretty excited about and starting to leverage is, I'm sure you've all seen Google's Project Sunroof. It's a little outdated. Well, GridNav with this program has enabled us to start doing this for folks. So you can click on the high-res imagery. Right here, you have demo high-res imagery of areas that I've flown around the Allentown and Trexlertown area. And we've uploaded it into GridNav, and you can see it's obviously, maybe not obviously, but it's much higher resolution, which can be good from a planning perspective. The other thing that you can do with it that's fairly valuable is if you do have a solar professional and they want to do a more accurate layout, or you can say, let's view this in 3D, and you get the full 3D point cloud, which you can then start doing very accurate measurements and takeoffs out of. You could put it into helioscope. But what's really fun is to emulate that Google Project Sunroof. So if you click solar irradiance, we have the irradiance for all the roofs. You can click on the different project or the different facilities and see how much energy each one can provide. Maybe what you're interested in is looking at residential sectors and seeing how much solar could we put if we really canvassed these building developments. Well, you can highlight different sectors, and it will give you the annual energy from those roofs. But once again, you need to pre-filter that. We're only interested in south-facing roofs, and then we're only interested in roofs that have areas large enough to sustain putting solar panels. So we have that capability that people can leverage to start looking at how much solar could my town really host just on the roof. And of course, because this is done as needed, it's far more up to date than even Google. You can see here, there's developments going in as we speak that current satellite maps don't have ingested. And then the last real trick here is if we look at Allentown, I'm going to make it high contrast. Allentown has recently, oh, maybe I need to be here and here. There we go. I gotta turn this off. Sorry. Allentown has recently, in 2025, commissioned LiDAR flight over all of Allentown, and the irradiance pipeline allows us to do the entire area of Allentown. Not quite as high resolution, and you don't get that 3D point cloud, but you still have the regional planning capabilities. If anybody's interested in understanding if you can do this with the existing USGS LiDAR, not quite as well. The Allentown LiDAR was a quality one survey. It's about a magnitude more precise and more dots than the whole countrywide survey that they do floodplains from. But if you have high resolution LiDAR data, you can also leverage that. I'm going to call it there. There's plenty of other features that we could go into. And if you're interested, I recommend you reach out to any of us. And I am happy to answer any questions you might have.